Hi, last video of the day. I want to talk to you about Oscar Wilde and the art for art's sake movement. So, Oscar Wilde as an individual is quite interesting. I hope you read the bio in the textbook about Oscar Wilde. And, he's known for a, hugely flamboyant person, a lot of wit. If you've never seen The Importance of Being Earnest, that's a pretty good play. Very witty, lots of language play in it, that kind of thing. Now, here's the context, okay? So most of the 19th century, and we've been looking at, poets like Tennyson, Browning, Matthew Arnold, and of course Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And let me just talk for a second about Elizabeth Barrett Browning. We read Aurora Leigh, or more accurately, a small portion of Aurora Leigh, since it's actually an extremely long verse novel. But Aurora Leigh, like a lot of other works of the time, are really connected to the idea that art should both entertain and educate. We should learn something. And I don't mean lessons in calculus, moral lessons, life lessons, how to be or how not to be. And before you kind of fluff that off and say, well, how ridiculous, quite frankly, there's a lot of that in our own time as well. If anything, maybe more of that than the opposite. But the idea that art should somehow convey a moral message, Oscar Wilde and other people like him felt was a burden, that it was unnecessary and, if anything, got in the way. Okay, it just got in the way. And the argument is that it should just be about beauty. So when we look at the art for art's sake movement, if we look at the preface to the picture of Dorian Gray, now if you've never seen a movie or read the book, the picture of Dorian Gray, again, spoiler alert, right, is about a man who at a young age, perhaps 20, 19, something like that, has his portrait taken, painting. And after that, he mysteriously never ages. His image is always the same. And what ages is the portrait, which he keeps stuck up in an attic. And Dorian Gray becomes quite a, let's say, bad guy. I don't want to get into all of it. There's a lot of, well, you can see it for yourself if you want to watch a movie or read the book. Again, I don't want to do the spoiler thing. But the point is he never changes. He looks like he's a very young man, even though time passes, chronological time keeps on passing. Well, a lot of people thought that was a terribly immoral book. Okay, a terribly immoral book, especially because there's a lot of hints and insinuations about homosexuality. And of course, Oscar Wilde very famously was gay and went to prison for being gay. But that's another story, if you will. And so Wilde wanted to kind of free up art from the obligation of presenting, positive morals, that sort of thing. And so his preface, which is quite short, could squeeze onto a single page quite easily, right? And it's basically written in a series of paradoxes or contradictions, right? But as you read through it and read carefully through it, you should see how his argument is developing. That it's all about the beauty of the art. It's about the thing which is being described. And that moral behavior, well, quite frankly, rests with people. And so when I look at this and I think of our own times, for instance, you hear a lot of stories where people argue that certain books should be banned in public schools, that kids or young people should not be exposed to certain ideas because it would corrupt them or be immoral. In fact, some of the literature that is most famous and highly regarded has often been banned at one point in time or another, one place or time or another. And there's like still that, there is still very much that thought. People talk about video games and movies in the same light, right? They didn't have those in Oscar Wilde's time. But once, like for instance, movies came out, people were very concerned that movies would glamorize crime and make people oversexed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And people talk about video games and dirty language, dirty words in music, lyrics, in hip hop or other forms of music, whatever. And so don't think that we've kind of pushed this away. And on the other hand, there's also a very strong school of thought that says, no, art should in fact be used to promote social change, social justice, et cetera, which is just another form of what they were doing in the 19th century. It's a different lesson. And maybe it's a different moral lesson, but it's still the same idea that art has this burden to express these certain values that at one point in time are considered positive values by a certain group, and they're pushing those values. Now maybe it's Harriet Beecher Stowe writing Uncle Tom's Cabin in the United States during the time of slavery, right? And if you're not familiar with Uncle Tom's Cabin, you should be, by the way. It's very much an anti-slavery piece, a novel. Okay, it's a very anti-slavery message. And it's not subtle. It's not in the least bit subtle. Okay? And while I think and would hope that in our own time today that everybody would be against slavery, that's not the point. The point is that was the burden that art had, right? That it was trying to push that perspective. So here we are in the 21st century. We're not probably, for the most part, talking about slavery, but we have other things that we're talking about. And some people would argue very vociferously that art should, in fact, push that perspective. Art should push these positive morals, whatever that artist thinks is a positive moral, and so that the reader is swayed. Again, this goes way back, like ancient Greek, Aristotle type stuff, right? The entertain and educate argument. And like I said, the educate is moral education. So when you look at the art for art's sake movement, which has a lot of adherents, not just Oscar Wilde, but the art for art's sake movement basically says, no, let's focus on beauty, focus on art, let's worry about making good art and the skill of the artist, whether it's a musician, a writer, a sculptor, a painter, and that should be the focus and not the message. And so he finishes with the famous line, all art is quite useless. I love that line. Useless refers to the utilitarian, meaning there's something that can come of it. Like when people say, well, you should learn classical music because it'll make you better at math, and thus you can be a good engineer. That'll be useful. How about listening to Mozart because you just want to hear the beauty of Mozart's music? Right? That's where Wilde is going. Why do you think when budgets get cut, arts programs, music programs get cut first? Because all art is useless. Unless you can swear, get the board of trustees to say, oh no, we need better engineers. Better engineers know Mozart. Have fun reading. Oscar Wilde, Preface to Picture of Dorian.